Hello, welcome to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm McKelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 13 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire series by George R.R. Martin. Today we're discussing chapter 12 of A Game of Thrones, Eddard 2.
And you all know the drill by now. We'll chat about the chapter, try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the TV show, indulge in a little pedantry and cover some reader mail. Be sure to check out our show notes. They provide some additional information about the characters and other things of note in this chapter.
And if you like what we're doing, you can always support the show by leaving a review on iTunes or at podchaser.com. That would really help us out, and we promise to be your best friend if you do.
How are you?
I'm all right.
Good, glad to hear it. We've got a lot to get through.
Yes, we sure do.
Let's get on with it today. So a quick recap of what Eddard was up to previously. Last time we saw him, he was in bed with Catelyn, but a lot's happened since then. He's been on a boar hunt, his son fell from a tower, not killed, but not regained consciousness. His bastard son's been shipped off to the Night's Watch, and he's apparently, reluctantly, accepted the job of Hand of the King to his old friend Robert Baratheon. McKelly, why don't you give us the summary?
Okay, this is a longish summary, longest one I've read.
You can skip reading the chapter, really. McKelly will take care of this.
Pretty much. There's a lot to unpack here, so we thought it was worth the extended summary. All right, here we go. So King Robert and Ned ride out before dawn to see some of the north. Robert is tired of the slow pace of the huge wheelhouse. He asks Ned if they can strike out on their own just 2 nights on the road. In typical Ned fashion, he reminds Robert of their duties to family and realm. Robert chides Ned for never having been a careless boy, even when he was a boy. Robert then questions the name of the woman he refers to as your bastard's mother. Ned responds with Willa, and then follows up with, and I would sooner not speak of her. Robert mentions that she must have been special to make Eddard Stark forget his honor. Ned is pained by this, and said it dishonored both him and Catelyn. Robert then gives Ned a letter from Lord Varys, his master of whisperers. Ned fears it's about Lysa Arryn's accusation. Instead, it references Daenerys Targaryen marrying a Dothraki horse lord. Robert says the info came from Ser Jorah Mormont, who has been spying on the Targaryen siblings for Varys in hopes of a royal pardon. I know, scandalous. Ned is familiar with Jorah's transgressions, as House Mormont owns fealty to him. Jorah escaped Ned and Ice's justice and fled to Essos. Ned and Robert see this wedding news in very different ways. Robert wants her and Viserys dead, as he's concerned about Khal Drogo's 100,000-strong Khalasar. Ned says it doesn't matter because the Dothraki fear the open sea. We learn that the treatment of the Targaryen children almost tore their friendship apart before. Ned thought the murder of Rhaegar's children at the command of Tywin Lannister was unspeakably vile. Robert thought it was the price of war. It took Lyanna's death to reconcile them. Ned asks Robert to name a Warden of the East. He suggests Robert's brother Stannis, if not young Robert Arryn. Robert divulges reluctantly that he's already offered the title to Jaime Lannister. Ned thinks it gives the Lannisters too much power, as Tywin is already Warden of the West. Robert isn't concerned about it. Ned then tells Robert that when he arrived in King's Landing, after the battle on the Trident, he found King Aerys dead, Lannister banners flying, and Jaime sitting the Iron Throne. Robert laughs it off and says someone had to kill Aerys. It saved them from having to do it. Ned responds that they weren't sworn brothers of the Kingsguard. Later, Robert admits he didn't want the crown, he just wanted Lyanna safe and by his side. And by the end of their conversation, Ned is left with a sense of helplessness.
Oh, good stuff. So, Bachelorette Westeros, we have another candidate.
Candidate number 2.
Willa. So, obviously, that could just be a name he's given to this person to hide the true identity.
Right,
we don't know. But again, he gets upset by the mention of the tryst, which again suggests that it must be a lie. Because if it was Willa, girl he met,
right,
then it wouldn't be a big deal. Just mention it, just admit to it, and move on.
Yeah, he does mention that it brought dishonor to him and Kat, so I guess,
Yeah, but Jon's existence brings the dishonor. It doesn't matter who the mother is at that point. So
good point. So maybe both Ashara, let's say it was Ashara. Maybe both Ashara and Ned pretended that Jon was Willa's baby so as to not bring dishonor to both of their houses.
So that Willa isn't just a figment of the imagination, she's some kind of wet nurse or something like that. But then
someone who did exist, Ashara could have hidden for the months that where she was showing, and then pretended that the baby was Willa's so as to not bring dishonor to both the Dane house and the Stark house.
Yeah, definitely plausible. Or whoever it is, it might be that. You see, we only have 2 candidates so far. I think we'll get more as time goes by. But if it isn't Ashara, it might be as yet unnamed third party, and they might have plotted the same plan to let's create or use this handmaiden Willa as the convenient scapegoat.
But
true. Again, the one thing about that is if you're going to concoct a cover story, then why not use that cover story to Cat?
Right.
Cat's really mad about this and has been for 14 years.
Good point.
If you said, it was a tavern wench called Willa, she'd be like, oh, thank God.
I thought it was
Ashara
Dane. No.
I saw the pictures. I like that Robert consoled Ned about his lapse in honor by saying, he hardly knew Cat at the time. Of course.
Which is true, except for the fact that they were married.
They were married, that's right. And she was pregnant.
Right.
But it's also true. I mean, like, the marriage was hurried and was quickly rearranged when Brandon was killed. It wasn't supposed to be Ned that was getting married. So, yeah, I mean, certainly from Robert's point of view, that barely seems like a lapse in decorum to Robert. For Ned, it's a source of continued agonies.
Yeah, maybe when you're the king, you can get away with,
but
feeling that way.
I think if these two switched roles, it would still be like this. Ned would still be straight-laced.
True. It is much more his personality. Yeah. Sir Jorah, say it ain't so.
Oh, Sir Jorah's spying on them. That is a shocker.
Yeah.
Because it seemed that Jorah was going to be a friend to Dany.
Right, she seems to be fond of him.
He gave her the books that she was probably... she liked the dragon's eggs too, but she was really touched by the books that he gave her as a wedding gift.
Yeah. I don't think I mentioned it in my summary, but he was exiled for trying to sell poachers to a Tyrashi slaver to earn some money. Ned, his internal dialogue mentions that House Mormont is proud and old and honorable, but they're also rather poor. So he was trying to earn a few extra bucks on the side, I guess.
Yeah, I'm going to say that you did say that.
Did I?
I'm going to say you did, because when I read it in this chapter, it didn't come as a surprise to me, and I was like, I must have heard this recently. So I'm going to guess it was in the podcast.
Well, now you know it twice.
Yes. Yeah. So Ned thinks of Jorah now as both a slaver and a spy. So he's not thinking that this in any way improves his character.
No, not so much. But just like Garrett in the chapter 1, who was in the prologue, you really got to know your audience better.
Well, I think he did. He ran away.
When you decided to sell them, you know that your house is fealty to Eddard Stark.
Yeah, but
you get caught.
Right, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
Garrett didn't know to not get caught. Jorah was acutely aware. If I get caught doing this, I'm out of here.
I am dead.
I am swimming the narrow sea.
I'm going to meet with ice.
So Robert's very worried about the news of Dany's wedding to Khal Drogo. Ned, on the other hand, entirely dismissive of it.
Yep. No, Ned's feelings is really doesn't matter how many Dothraki there are if they're stuck on the other side of the narrow sea, and it's pretty well known that Dothraki hate and fear the open sea. So he's got a valid point there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can see Robert's concern as well.
There's the possibility of a whole new slew of Targaryens.
Right. And now they're mixed with Dothraki horse lords. And so even if Khal Drogo won't, it's bred in him to fear the sea. So maybe he won't give Viserys the army he needs. But maybe down the line, one of Dany's children will be like, hey, my mom said it's no big deal. Let's take this Khalasar and go get my throne that's my right.
Yeah.
And did you notice that Drogo's legend more than doubled? Yeah. At the wedding, it was 40,000 in his Khalasar. Now it's 100,000. So give him a year. It might be in 1 million.
They are breeding, apparently. So So Robert mentions that Dany and Illyrio Mopatis in particular are bodyguarded by pointy-hatted eunuchs. I'm using air quotes.
As we do.
This is another reference to the Unsullied that we got an early mention also on Essos. The Unsullied are the castrated slave soldiers trained in Astapor on Essos. They're prized and feared, and they are both very useful because they're very good and a significant status symbol, which is why Mopatis has them.
But there was a second eunuch referenced in his Cerberus. He is not an Unsullied.
No.
Never be confused.
He is Unsullied in some ways, but he's not an Unsullied.
Right.
With a capital U.
Yes, Robert's only referring to the bodyguards of Illyrio.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes.
So Robert this whole conversation about the Targaryens makes him rue the chances he's had to kill Viserys and Dany when they were on Dragonstone and when they were young vagabonds.
Right.
I mean, I guess things haven't really changed until the marriage. You know, they were still vagabonds basically on Essos until
Beggar King and his little sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he says that he was talked out of it by Jon Arryn. And then I think at some point in this chapter, it dawns on Robert that he's appointed a hand just like Jon Arryn, who's going to try and talk him out of these things he wants to do. So
yeah, doesn't seem like Ned's had much luck talking him out of anything.
That is a good point. Yes,
it just seems to be annoying Robert. In fact, at one point, Ned goes, "Can I speak freely?" or something, and Robert goes, "I can't seem to stop you."
Yeah.
So, Robert explained what he's dealing with in King's Landing in Eddard 1 with, basically a bunch of people who are blowing smoke and people who are just flattering him and outright lying to him. So he appoints Ned because Ned is level-headed and has a solid moral compass, and he should be a good balance to Robert's impulsiveness and impatience. We'll see if he listens, though.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Robert was appointing Ned in a moment of clear thinking.
Right.
Even if he doesn't listen to Ned, the fact that his conscience will be pricked by Ned arguing against him will eventually make him a better person, you'd think.
Right, yeah.
Robert has a sort of more thoughtful moment where he recognizes that many of the houses of Westeros still refer to him, not to his face, as the usurper.
Yeah.
He cannot forget how many houses stood against him and for the Targaryens in the rebellion, and therefore, presumably they took the knee after the rebellion was over, but
yeah, you have to imagine
in their hearts.
Yeah, right. And that is exactly what Viserys is counting on.
Yeah.
We know because we read the book, Robert doesn't have that luxury, that Viserys is over there counting the houses that will back him if and when he gets to Westeros.
Yeah. But it's an interesting thing, though, because I think if you think about that situation, Aerys was a terrible king. Nobody thought Aerys was a great king. Some houses presumably felt, we have to be loyal to the royal house. We got to fight for them. They're the royal house. They're in charge.
Got to do their duty.
Which is why, as Robert, I would forgive them at the end of the rebellion.
Yep.
That makes perfect sense. It's hard to imagine that those houses, unless they were punished by Robert, which it seems quite a lot of them were not. Quite a lot of them received, were able to continue with what they were doing.
Seems like only a few were
Feels like
punished.
If I was a member of that house, I would then go, all right, you know what? I lost fair and square. You are better than they were. You forgave me for fighting against you.
Yeah.
They were monsters, and we're better off without them. I would think a lot of houses would be in that camp.
I agree. Yeah.
Much fewer would be in the, I still want those lunatic Targaryens back in charge.
I think we discussed this maybe in Dany 1, that especially the more affluent houses
Right, they're like the Tyrells.
Yeah.
That was the one I think we said.
As long as we get to keep making our money and do what we're doing.
It's hard to imagine them risking what they've got to plot to put the Targaryens back on the throne when they haven't lost anything with Robert on the throne.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. There are some, though, that obviously do fall in. I think the Darrys we mentioned were one who really do feel a loyalty to the Targaryens.
Yeah. Willem Darry's the one that got the kids away from Dragonstone to Essos. So I found it interesting that Robert and Ned had a huge falling out over the murder of Rhaegar's wife and children. I kind of forgot about that there was some bad blood between them for a while. And it was because Ned saw what was a rather gruesome scene that they paint as murder, and Robert saw it as a casualty of war.
Yeah, this is a thing I've been thinking about, actually. I think a lot of this is not... I mean, obviously, it kind of goes to their characters to a certain extent.
Yes.
But I think a lot of it is witnessing it. Ned witnessed it, right? And Robert wasn't there.
Well, I don't know that Ned witnessed the actual murder.
Not the murder, but he was in King's Landing and Robert wasn't.
Correct, yeah. Robert got injured in the Battle of the Trident.
The fact that the murders happened and Ned was there saw the dead bodies. Did Robert see the dead bodies?
Well, I can't remember if he says it or thinks it, but he mentions that Tywin presents the bodies as fealty to Robert. So I don't know if that meant physically.
Right. You see, I think I'd have to check on this, and I feel bad now for not doing this. So I'll notes and corrections next episode. I'll tell you. I think Ned went down there and Robert didn't, and all of this happened. I mean, we know that Ned was the one who saw Jaime sitting on the throne.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think all of these things happened in that period when Robert wasn't there. So I think this presenting of the bodies as fealty was not directly to him. It was a, we did this for you.
Yes.
So part of it, I think, is that if the children were murdered and shown to Robert there and then, he might also have felt a little bit of, man, this is not war. Possibly, this is murder right here.
Although him referring to them as only dragon spawn, maybe he wouldn't be so torn up about it. It's a pretty, for those of you who aren't reading along with us, it was a pretty atrocious scene they paint. The little girl, little Rhaenys, was crying as they dragged her from under her bed and put her to the sword, and baby Aegon was ripped out of Elia's arms and dashed against a wall. So, it was a pretty rough scene.
And then if you want to compound all this, and it's only, I mean, I feel bad for saying this about Elia, but it is only a footnote to this. They murdered Elia too, and she wasn't a Targaryen. She's a Martell. So, I mean, that one you could say literally is a murder, because let's say Robert wants to eradicate Targaryens from the world. Well, Elia is not one. Unless she happens to be pregnant right this second, she is not one, and there's no reason to kill her.
And it certainly, that particular act certainly didn't do him any benefits, because now he knows the Martells of Dorne.
Exactly.
Whether or not they're vocally saying, we're going to get you, you certainly have to think they're not pleased with him.
Right, exactly. They may not be pro-Targaryen, but they're sure as heck anti-Robert.
Right, yeah. But it took Lyanna's death to bring Robert and Ned back together. So out of tragedy came reconciliation, I guess. But so I have a question that I was thinking about when I read this part. So Robert says it was a hollow victory getting the crown. He didn't want the crown. He wanted Lyanna safe with him. That's all he wanted. So I'm wondering, do you believe that? Or do you think that's perspective talking after years of, he doesn't seem to really love the actual duty of being king, just kind of likes the perks?
It's a good question. I would say that he did not start the rebellion to get the crown.
Right. Yes, that's true.
And I would say that if you then or now gave him the choice of Lyanna's safety or the crown, he would have chosen Lyanna's safety. So I think in that respect, he's telling the truth there. But I think as the rebellion... So the sequence of events was the rebellion succeeded, he got the throne, and then Lyanna was found dead.
Right, yes.
So possibly some of it was, I've done it, I've defeated the Targaryens, I'll take the crown, and now Lyanna can be the queen. This is even better. This is great. This is everything I could ever have dreamed of. So I'll give him a pass on that one. I think he's being honest.
Yeah, I agree. But even with all these years to reflect, he still feels no guilt about the treatment of Rhaegar's family, which, you'd think over the years he might have mellowed on that a little bit. But no, he literally says he'll kill every Targaryen he can get his hands on and then piss on their grave. So... yeah, he's still holding quite the grudge. But technically, he is a Targaryen.
That's right. We did mention this. Yeah, he's 1/4
Yeah.
Targaryen
Wow.
himself.
We tweeted this out a while back, so if you're not following us on Twitter, you're missing these kind of nuggets. Robert and Rhaegar are second cousins, and their grandmother was Rhaella Targaryen, the daughter of King Aegon V, otherwise known as Egg.
Egg.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
So maybe once he passes away, Robert, maybe he'll set up a quarter of his grave to be pissed off. Piss here, please.
Pissing spot.
So yeah, he takes the trouble to remind Ned of the terrible ways that the Targaryens killed Ned's family.
Yeah, we don't really know specifics on it yet, but the way it's talked about so far, it sounds pretty awful. This is not the first time we've heard about this being a really rough way that they died.
And he mentions both the murder of Ned's father and brother, but also the multiple rapes of Lyanna by Rhaegar. Although I question how he knows that.
Yeah, he's just projecting it. He's lashing out.
Yeah,
I guess
she was a captive. It's
right.
Definitely possible, but
Yes.
I don't know if he knows that's the case.
So he's definitely got legitimate reasons to hate the Targaryens, but I mean, those children were. Their only crime was that they threatened his claim to the throne.
Yeah, but again, going back to what I was saying before, I think if he focused on being a good king, this whole thing goes away.
Right.
I mean, the only way, even with the Dothraki, that the Targaryens succeed is by lots of families joining their side in a future counter-rebellion.
Right.
And if you're a good king, that won't happen.
Yeah. Especially since how bad King Aerys was at being king.
Not all Targaryen kings were terrible,
Right.
but the one that they all remember was appalling. So
They might feel like this is a good time for a break here from the Targaryen dynasty.
So we hear, while Robert's ranting about the Targaryens, Ned has a little go at the Lannisters. You know,
Right.
his description of getting to King's Landing and seeing the Lannister banners flying and Aerys dead and Jaime sitting on the throne.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of, obviously, it really irks him. And it irks him that they came so late to the rebellion.
That seems to really be what gets his goat. And then, when they did decide to enter, once it was basically decided, once Rhaegar was dead and Ned and all the forces were heading to King's Landing, I guess they decided, all right, now we'll get in. Yeah. And then, so they jump in, they go to King's Landing, Time is there with his 12,000 strong army. Aerys must think, hey, all right, my old buddy here is here to help save me. He says, we're here to pledge our allegiance to you, and then he stabs him in the back, almost literally, because his son
did it.
Yeah. So Ned not only doesn't like that they waited until it was decided, but he also doesn't like the way that they did it. Robert, he couldn't care less about that.
But honestly, I mean, just from a sort of like a strategic point of view, what Tywin did was pretty smart.
Yeah, it's kind of a Trojan horse type
right,
thing.
exactly. Let's get in there and we could lay siege to this city.
Right.
Or I could just take it today with a little bit of treachery.
That's true. Yeah. That's basically, I guess, Robert's point.
Yeah.
But it feels like Robert is ignoring some major red flags with his faith in the Lannisters.
Yeah, but that being said, that's why he married Cersei. He married Cersei to, because they were the most influential other family.
True.
So marry them together. He knows he's got Ned's loyalty. So that's so basically, actually, if you think about it, if you think of the four major regions, the Baratheons in the south, the Lannisters in the west, the Arryns in the east, and the Starks in the north. By marrying a Lannister, he basically has all four on his side.
Right, because the Arryns, Jon Arryn was his hand, Ned was his best friend, so marry a Lannister, and you got the four corners covered.
Yeah. The only other where you really need to build a bridge, of course, is back to the Martells in Dorne.
Yeah.
But you can only marry one at a time.
Right. Well,
and they happen to kill the marryable one.
Good point. Yeah, that again was not maybe their greatest idea there.
But yeah, I mean, if you think about it, that could have been a good solution if he'd married Elia Martell and appointed Tywin Lannister as his hand.
Right. Yeah.
then he's kind of covering all the bases. But again, that might not be tight enough. I mean, Tywin was hand to King Aerys and
Good point.
betrayed him too.
But Robert plans to name Jaime as Warden of the East. So this might get a little confusing. I just want to clear it up. Jaime is already a brother of the Kingsguard. So you might say, well, that's not possible for him to be named Warden of the East because brothers of the Kingsguard have to give up all claims to land. So they can't own land, they can't take a wife, they can't father children, but they can hold titles such as Warden of whatever direction or Hand of the King because it's not a hereditary title. So just wanted to clear that up. So he wouldn't have to let him out of being a member of the Kingsguard to become Warden of the East.
Ned's big concern appears to be that by having a Lannister as Warden of the East and the West, that meant that half the armies of Westeros were under their control.
Correct.
And
that is a problem, especially for an already ambitious house.
Yeah.
And we see examples of that, little ones like the lion on Joffrey's surcoat along with the crowned stag, and Jaime sitting the Iron Throne after killing King Aerys and flying the Lannister banners. So there are some examples of just how ambitious House Lannister is. So giving them 50% power. Technically, there's 5 armies. Well, I talk about it more in the background.
Okay. But how ambitious could they be? I mean, their daughter is the queen, and their grandson is heir apparent.
Right.
I mean, they're going to rule but they won't be called Lannister. They'll be called Baratheon.
Technically.
So, what would you plot? I mean, right,
Right.
you
You've
could
already got it all.
Yeah, exactly. You could get rid of Robert to speed things up, but there's not a lot.
As we learned in Bran 2, that is part of Cersei.
Right.
Certainly wouldn't mind if that happened.
At least a dream of hers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Ned's main argument is that Jaime will succeed as Warden of the West after Tywin dies, but that's not entirely accurate because, as I mentioned earlier, it's not a hereditary title. So as long as Robert is king, he can switch him out and be like, okay, you can go back to the West. I'm going to appoint, Edmure Tully as the Warden of the East or something like that.
But you've got to imagine it's got to go to the most important lord in that region. And in the West, that would be the Lord of the Lannisters.
Right, so yeah. So Jaime could move from East to West, take his father's spot, and then rename someone in the East. Maybe
maybe by that time, Robert
Arryn will be old enough.
Yeah, right. I'm kind of with you. I feel like that title does not put the Lannisters any closer to usurping the throne from Robert.
As long as Robert is king. If something happens to Robert and Joff takes over, then that could be trouble because he could say, "Oh, I like it just the way it is."
Or if they go with Robert Arryn as Warden of the East now, when Joff takes the crown, he could go, "No, actually, I'm going to make Jaime."
Right.
So I just don't see what you're saving, really.
Yeah.
If I were Ned, I would let this one go. Now we've thought this through.
Yeah,
just
pick your battles, Ned. Come on. So Ned brings up the same point that we've made multiple times, that Jaime is bound to King Robert, just like he was bound to Aerys, which ended in a spectacular failure. And Robert brings up what we had surmised, that Robert got the crown thanks to Jaime's lack of honor in fulfilling his job. So,
and I would guess as well, you've got one other thing, which is the family tie. Jaime had no family tie to Aerys. He was just Kingsguard.
Right.
And he did know what Aerys was like. I mean, you couldn't not know what Aerys was like. And so, but then again, I guess he knows what Robert's like. And so that's not going to save him. All right, so some background information. So Lord Varys, we've got to mention, he's Robert's Master of Whisperers, basically his spy master. He serves on the small council.
Who doesn't? How small is this council?
He's a eunuch, but not unsullied.
Yes.
He did previously serve Aerys. He's a great character who we'll get to know.
Yes. So you're curious about why I have House Woad.
You do have House Woad. I've read the chapter a couple of times and I don't ever remember reading House Woad.
It's not mentioned.
Oh, so why is House Woad getting mentioned
So House
here?
Woad is a noble house of landed knights in the Riverlands with fealty to Harrenhal, much like us.
Yeah, that's it.
One brother is named Willis Woad, and the other is never mentioned. Their motto is, "Touch me not." The reason I bring it up is because when Ned is super annoyed with Robert for bringing up Willa, Robert says, "Please drop it if you love me the way you say you love me." And he says, all right. but you're so prickly you should take a hedgehog as your sigil.
Okay.
House Woad has 3 hedgehogs
As their
its
sigil.
So when he said that, I thought, I wonder if there already is a sigil with a hedgehog.
That's awesome.
And so I found House Woad,
Well
3 hedgehogs
played.
as a sigil.
When I saw that one of the son's brothers was named Willis Woad, I thought this was going to be a different Strokes reference. So, but that's better.
You're talking about Willis?
Exactly. Yeah. Robert says that no wife wants Baelor the Blessed in the marital bed. Baelor Targaryen was the 9th Targaryen king. He was a septon, which is like a priest, and was very pious. He advanced the faith of the 7 considerably in the 7 kingdoms. He was considered weak by some. He was gaunt from fasting, very charitable to the consternation of the nobility. He forged peace with Dawn after his elder brother Daeron, who we've mentioned, fought wars with them. He was pretty sexually repressed and kept his sisters imprisoned against the possibility of them losing their virtue. He sounds a bit twisted, honestly.
Yeah.
But for his charity, which was considerable, being the king, I always think the money's not really yours, but he was giving it away willy-nilly. He is very fondly recalled by common people to this day. The Great Sept, the great cathedral in King's Landing, is named for him.
Couldn't he have just lowered taxes?
But that wouldn't really have helped the poor people, because they
That's
were
true.
already poor. They were,
Yeah. The folks in Fleet Bottom probably weren't
Exactly.
paying much in the way of taxes. Okay, so I want to dive a little bit more into the Warden versus Lord Paramount thing. So a Warden is the military commander of their designated area in the event of a foreign attack. A Lord Paramount is the political position ruling one of the 9 regions of Westeros. Right now, where we are in our book, we've got the Starks, the Greyjoys, Tullys, Aarons, Lannisters, Baratheons of Storm's End, Tyrells, Martells, and the Baratheon of Dragonstone.
Oh, I see.
Of these, the heads of houses Stark, Lannister, Arryn, and Tyrell are traditionally wardens of the North, West, East, and South, respectively. The Hand of the King is also technically a warden, as he heads the royal army.
Fascinating.
So there's technically 5 wardens.
So basically, the wardens have sort of like a military oversight over more than just their traditional home.
Yes.
Also the sort of surrounding. So,
But the last time these titles were evoked was during the War of the Nine Penny Kings, which was about 40 years ago.
Okay.
So it's not something that's used very often.
all right, good. That's good. So, differences to the television show. The book was much more dynamic. They're basically riding the whole time they're having this conversation. They're pulling up occasionally, but there's lots of riding going on. In the show, Robert and Ned are sitting having a picnic with
I remember that.
absolute smorgasbord of fruit, like way more than even a king would need. You know, I mean, obviously, you're putting a picnic on for the king, but I mean, it's a 40-day journey.
Right.
You know, you've got to preserve fruit
Save
a
some.
little bit. I
Yeah.
mean, it looked like Carson and I went to the Hotel del Coronado in San Diego for Sunday brunch once, and it looked like that.
Yeah. For these 2 guys.
For these 2 guys, exactly. The conversation was curtailed in the TV show, but the 2 themes, who's Jon's mama, and we should have killed the Targaryen kids when we had the chance, and Ned frowning upon that.
Right. Yeah.
All of that was pretty much covered. So, pedantry corner. We've got a couple. McKelly has joined in on pedantry corner this time. I'll start with mine. It says at one point in the book that Ned is thinking about whether or not he'll be a good hand, and he said he was no Jon Arryn. He, Ned, was no Jon Arryn to curb the wildness of the king and teach him wisdom. Robert would do what he pleased, as he always had. Well, so did Jon Arryn curb him, or did he not? If he always did it, then Jon Arryn didn't curb him
That's a good
either.
point. Maybe he sculpted him a little bit, brought him, a little back from the edge.
Okay. I still think that's wrong.
Okay, so here's... I have an issue with the title of Warden. It seems like a bit of a hollow title to me. Okay, so I'm going to paint a scenario for you. So Robert Arryn is Lord of the Eyrie, but Jaime is Warden of the East.
Yeah.
Robert decides not to get involved in a war the king wants the Knights of the Vale to enter.
Right.
Jaime, a Lannister from the Westerlands, tries to rally the troops on behalf of the king. Who are the Lords of the Vale going to respond to? The house they've had fealty to for centuries, or a Lannister?
That's a very good point, and actually goes to why it's usually the ruling lord
Yes.
of the most important house of that region who gets made the warden.
Right, yeah.
Because otherwise they have no authority. That's an excellent point.
Yeah, right. I mean, in this instance, because Robert's 6, it might have worked if they'd named, someone else from the Vale as warden.
Right.
But regardless, without the title or support of the Lord Paramount of the region, the warden doesn't really hold much power.
Yeah, but of course, Robert Arryn would face significant censure if he were to refuse.
Right. Yes. So I went digging on the internet to see if I could find anyone else that had issues with this, and I found a bunch of folks talking about it, and some folks felt that it was a detail added before Martin really had thought through the whole roles of Warden versus Lord Paramount. One of the things that, it's kind of, the concept is kind of muddled right now. Ned says Warden of the West will pass to Jaime. We talked about this a little bit ago. But Robert isn't given title of Warden of the East. So does it get passed down? Does it not get passed down? I guess traditionally it just does. So maybe Ned assumed it'll just be passed down to Jaime. But he knows that Robert isn't giving it to Robert Arryn. So
yeah, but actually I think you've cracked it there, because you've shown the reason why, even though it isn't hereditary, it has to be hereditary, because it has to go to... Because otherwise, you're going to have a conflict between, divided loyalties of the people.
Right, you have two heads, you have no head.
Yeah.
But one guy, talking about how Martin hadn't fully fleshed it out yet, he compared it to Tyrion's somersault, which we've also mentioned as something he'd have rewritten in hindsight.
Possibly. So, just a quick thank you to all the listeners. I think we've got listeners in 17 countries now,
Yes,
which is extremely
as of this
exciting.
morning.
And so that's great. We hope you're enjoying listening, and we please reach out to us. We're not getting an awful lot of reader mail. We'd love to have a little bit more.
Yeah. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you have questions, what you want to talk about.
What we could do better.
Right.
So, concluding on this one, so there was an awful lot of exposition in this chapter, this conversation.
Is. Even though really not much happens, you're just riding around, but they're talking about so many important things.
Yeah. So Ned's feelings for the Lannisters almost match Robert's for the Targaryens.
Yeah. We start to see Robert is more than just a drunk jokester. He appears to have a serious lapse in judgment at times when it comes to the Lannisters. I guess he's literally in bed with them.
Yeah.
But
I think some of it is just his laziness. You know,
Yeah.
they're trying to pull the strings and he can't be bothered resisting.
I agree. Yeah. We already know that Cersei wants him dead, so that's not a great combo.
Yeah. What he needs is a hand who can guide him,
Yes.
and a king's guard who would never ever turn on him.
Oh boy. He really has no interest in the actual act of being a king. He really just seems to like the perks.
Yeah. And he's never going to forgive the Targaryens.
Nope.
Robert wants Ned as his hand because he's all the things that Robert needs the hand to be.
Yes.
Even though he's all the things that he doesn't want the hand to be, because he complains about it all the time. Every time Ned opens his mouth, he complains about it. He hasn't listened to a single thing Ned said
so far.
Yeah.
Of course, maybe in time. He just needs to warm up to the idea.
Yeah.
Ser Jorah is spying on Dany and Viserys, and Robert wants her dead.
Shocking.
Yeah, we have to keep that. It'd be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
We have to keep an eye on all that.
Yep. The Lannisters are on the cusp of gaining more control over the realm.
Yeah, and it looks like Ned seriously thinks that's a bad idea. So we'll see if he can
But
talk
again,
Robert.
I think you've hit the nail on the head here. It's pretty ceremonial. And you mentioned it's literally for threats from outside.
True.
So
Yeah.
certainly if Jaime tried to call the banners of the East to uprise against Robert, they would definitely say no to that.
Right.
You know?
Robert Arryn. Robert.
No, I meant Robert Baratheon.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So if
Jaime goes around, hey, we're gonna...
Yeah. Your role is to protect us from outside threats. We
Right.
don't listen to you on this one.
Good point. And Ned's final thoughts in the chapter are of helplessness and desire to just go home. So, not a great start to his new job.
And I think they're still in the north.
They are.
Haven't even got to the Riverlands yet. But
boy.
it must be hard for Ned, because if you think about it, his son is still terribly ill, but with the prospect of recovering.
Right.
And now he's left.
Yeah.
He's not going to see him wake up.
Right. All right. I think that's it.
Yep.
Okay, well, as always, you can reach us at ghosts.harrenhall@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at @ghostheronhall. And now we're out on Facebook, so go out and like and follow our Facebook page.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.